it goes to show how cynical and toxic our politics can be when the release of an American from a penal colony in Russia is not like a celebrated unifying moment, but rather an opportunity for cheap shots and bad faith attacks from Republicans on Twitter. Instead, today's lesson in grace came from one of the people who feels Whelan's absence the most, his twin brother, David Whelan.
I think President Biden made the right decision. His job is to protect all Americans and to care about all Americans. And it would have been wrong for him to leave behind an American when he had the ability to bring them home. And so I appreciate that he may have even waited. He may have even delayed in a hope that Paul might have been able to come home. But it was absolutely the right decision to bring Ms. Griner home. And I'm so glad that he did. I'm super excited that she's free and able to spend the time with her family.
Joining me now is Terry Jackson, Executive Director of the Women's National Basketball Players Association. I just have to start, Terry. How do you feel? How do you feel today when you woke up and saw this news? Oh, we're having trouble with sound, guys.
I feel today, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
I feel today very different from what I felt yesterday, but I got to tell you, each day I have held out hope. Each day I would wake up saying BG's coming home today. And when that didn't happen at night, I would say, okay, it's going to be tomorrow. Yesterday, I heard some news that had me anxiously anticipating today. And I woke up and my heart has just been filled with joy, lots of relief, as you can imagine. I have cried, I have laughed, I have smiled, I just everything. It's just a roller coaster of mostly good emotions. And yet also we recognize that Paul Whelan's family, David Whelan, who I had the opportunity to speak with a few months ago, a really emotional, heartfelt conversation for the two of us, supporting each other and just recognizing that we are now connected. So it has been the highs and lows of that, but I would not be honest if I wasn't saying that my heart is overjoyed for BG, for Sherelle, for her family, and for the 144. That's what we call the members of our union.
I got to say, Terry, if you look at this sort of at the arc of the last couple of years, WNBA players got rid of a Republican senator in Georgia, fought for Black Lives Matter, have now organized and helped bring home a player. What are the conversations like amongst WNBA players? Are they obviously they're overjoyed, but are they sort of empowered, thinking, wow, we are athletes and we've also been able to affect international change? What are the conversations happening amongst players right now?
Since 2016, when they stood up unified for Black Lives Matter, in 2017 against racial hate in Charlottesville, for years on issues surrounding voting rights, reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights, our members understand the power of their voice, particularly the power of the collective. They understand what it means to be a part of a union. And we, as the Players Association staff, are right there supporting them on the court and off the court with their advocacy. They are amazing. As you can imagine, it is a privilege to have the job that I have. Right. I'm a lawyer, and yet I get to do this. No lawyer gets to report to the players that I get to report to. What they do is nothing less than amazing. Flipping a Senate seat, and now here, being able to rally and mobilize human rights activists, civil rights activists, the Win with Black Women Network, so many, the AFL-CIO, so every sports players association stood with us because our members rallied them around the We Are BG campaign. And I'm just so grateful to get to do what I get to do.
Terry Jackson, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and congratulations to you and all the players in the WNBA. Really excited for you.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Let's bring in Julia Ioffe, founding partner and Washington correspondent for Puck, and Nayar Haq, former State Department senior advisor and former senior director at the White House. Thank you all so much for joining me this evening. Julia, I'll start with you. I guess after something like this happens, the immediate thought is Is there a warning that needs to go out to Americans? I mean, there's probably hundreds, of Americans, hundreds, thousands, who on a regular basis fly in and out of Russia for business. Does this mean that they should no longer do that? Does this mean that this is sort of a shot across the bow? What does this mean for sort of civilian American relations in and out of Russia?
Well, that warning went out actually about a year ago. The State Department said that Americans should not travel to Russia because of fear of things like this. Because as you recall, around this time last year, things were heating up around Ukraine. Washington and Moscow were involved in pretty furious diplomacy, or what the Kremlin was trying to pretend was diplomacy, to prevent the war that is now happening from happening. And once the war did break out, unfortunately, Brittany Griner had the terrible fortune of getting stopped and arrested at the airport just 2 weeks before Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. And she was arrested when he already knew he was going to invade Ukraine. So he had this high value prisoner and hostage in his hands. But as soon as the war broke out, I think it became clear that no American should go to Russia pretty much for anything.
Nayyera, I'm curious about this because why Brittany Griner, right? There are high-profile business people that go in and out of Moscow. There are high-profile business people. There are entertainers who sometimes perform there. Why her? What was Vladimir Putin hoping to do in grabbing a WNBA player 2 weeks before an invasion?
Yeah, well, she also has been going in and out of Russia for nearly 10 years,
right,
making nearly 10 times the amount of money there in the offseason than she's ever made as a star WNBA player. So she had reason to go there, but she also embodies almost everything that Putin rails against and tries to oppress in his own country. He has effectively outlawed gay and lesbian couples being open about their love. The idea of a black athlete challenging white supremacy, right? The cannabis consumption, also something that he has harsh penalties in place for. So the opportunity, as he was planning to invade Ukraine, as the United States and European allies are standing up for democracy, to grab a star American who, in addition, has all of these identities that challenge Russian ideology and white supremacy, it really was too good for Putin to pass up.
And so what? And I know there's a lot to this. I'm going to take this to Julie as well. Then why now, right? Because none of those identities have changed, right? If part of it was this symbolic thing of I'm going to take this black, queer, athletic woman and I'm going to hold her and I'm going to rub it in America's face, then why would Putin decide? I mean, I don't think he cares about getting her home for Christmas. So why now, the end of this sort of conversation?
Putin has not had, the war has not gone the way that Putin has wanted it to go. It was not in his intention supposed to last 9 months.
Right.
Now heading into the winter months, President Biden made it clear that unless a discussion with Brittany Griner's release was on the table, he would not meet one-on-one with Putin. So there is an opportunity with Russia being a bit on the back foot when it comes to the war, for there to be some concessions made. Now, with that said, the United States over the summer had proposed a 2-for-2 exchange to get Paul Whelan out as well. But unfortunately, Putin realized that he could, while he would release Brittany Griner potentially as a loss to him,
right,
losing a valuable asset, he could gain the opportunity to continue to divide America along racial lines. This conversation that we have had about a white veteran being left behind and a black woman, was it worth it?
Right.
To release a black woman, all of that chatter online is exactly the Soviet playbook that Putin has played against us in 2016 and is starting once again.
Julia, I'm curious about this. Most of us don't know the internal negotiations, right? Everything I know about hostage negotiation, I learned from like Samuel L. Jackson in a movie a couple years ago. But one thing to sort of go with Nayyera's point is when you look up who this Victor Bout guy was, like he was like the merchant of death. That Nick Cage movie Lord of War was based on him. Like this is a bad guy. This is a Bond villain. So what were, to the degree that we can understand it on the outside, what were some of the negotiations that may have gone on that made this trade possible? Was it the only deal at the table? It was like either get this done or nothing. How was this balance sort of calculated by the Biden administration?
Well, from what we understand, this was basically the only thing the Russians would agree to, that it's Victor Bout for Griner or nothing. And it is strange, you're right, it's a pretty bad look to be pushing this hard for the Merchant of Death. And all day, Russian state media has been trying to humanize him and trying to evoke sympathy by showing his crying wife and talking about how much he's aged and how much weight he's lost in prison. But it's a weird look. But, you know, he's a former Soviet intelligence officer. Putin has a soft spot for those. And again, it's a very lopsided trade, and it makes the Americans look bad. I mean, it has created this kind of political furor that we're seeing now. It is also an incomplete victory for the Biden administration because he only got one of 2 hostages home. And again, it's just, again, it splits America down the middle, and it gives Russia something to, you know, distract Russians from the fact that Russia is losing at home. I will say, by the way, to the earlier point about why Putin took Brittany Griner, we don't know. We still don't know whether Brittany Griner was targeted specifically or whether she was held up at the airport. And because what is far more likely is that she was held up, her baggage was scanned, they found the drugs, and once they realized she was a foreigner, that's when they call in the FSB and they realized they had a high value target. Yeah, exactly. And that's when it really all kicked into gear.
Julia Ioffe and Nayar Haq, thank you all so much for starting off our show today.